Hello, everybody, and welcome to Final Take. I'm Michael Scott, and boy, do I have a great show lined up for you guys today. Can Cam Newton cash in after being cut by Carolina? Yesterday, the Carolina Panthers released Cam Newton after 9 seasons at the helm as their starting quarterback. So now, today, what exactly does the market look like for him? We're going to explore all that today. Make sure you tune in. Find out right now. Let's get it going, baby. So, yesterday, Cam Newton got cut, right? And on March 17th, the team actually granted Cam Newton permission to go out and find a trade partner for him, because what did they do later that day? They signed his replacement, Teddy Bridgewater, shortly after. And needless to say, Cam was not very happy, right? Well, he's been on the market for over a week now. Him and his agent have been shopping him around for potential trade partners, and the market basically at this point doesn't exist, right? So the team made the decision yesterday afternoon to actually cut Cam Newton. Now, the reason why there's not a good market out there for Cam is because the 2015 NFL MVP has missed 16 of his last 32 games with right shoulder and left foot injuries. During that time, he's had surgeries on both the shoulder and the foot, and really over the past 2 seasons, his health has been extremely poor. However, since 15, when he has played, he has performed well in a statistical sense, right? Now, according to SpotTrack, the Panthers are going to save over $21 million against the cap this season by releasing Cam Newton. Now, the cost is only going to be $2 million in dead money for the team, so they're not really giving up a lot to let Cam Newton go at this point. If they would have cut him last year after the injury occurred, they would have been obligated to pay him $9 million. However, with only $2 million in dead cap money, really, it's a move that if you're a sensible GM, you're not even questioning at this point, especially after you just signed Teddy Bridgewater to a 3-year, $60 million contract. Now, Cam Newton has a specific skill set that has led to the abuse he's taken. It's one of the primary reasons he's had these surgeries in the past few seasons. And really, at this point in time, you got to understand that he's only one of 2 quarterbacks in NFL history to amass 50 rushing touchdowns in a season. Can you guys guess the other one? The other one is none other than Hall of Famer Steve Young, formerly of the San Francisco 49ers. So at this point, what we got to explore, and the question we have to ask ourselves is, what exactly does the market look like for Cam Newton at this point? Well, what you have to understand is the NFL is a business. And now that he's actually in the business of the NFL, he's no longer with the franchise, the owner, the GM, or the coach that drafted him. So those emotional ties to see him succeed, they no longer exist. Any team that's going to take a flyer on Cam Newton at this point, they're essentially rolling the dice and making a gamble. So you got to look at everything from a business or an investment standpoint regarding Cam Newton, right? So the past few seasons, what you're seeing out of Cam Newton is a really volatile player. Sometimes he's not playing at all, specifically last season. Or other times, he's performing pretty well. He's playing at a high level. He's still running for touchdowns. He's still passing for over 3,000 yards, and he's throwing a lot more touchdowns than interceptions. So you're seeing an up and down trajectory with him, really, that changes periodically. Now, right now, his stock is low, probably lower than it's ever been. No team on the market was willing to go out and trade for him. So really, what you're going to do if you're looking to make a move at the quarterback position, because there are teams out there right now, if you're a GM or a head coach, what you have to do really is you have to buy low on Cam Newton with hopes that he can outperform that contract that you give him and that he can make some type of impact with your franchise. And it's not necessarily guaranteed because of the fact that we're talking about Cam Newton and health concerns. So you're going to ask yourself the question, why would teams go and sign him if the Panthers were unable to trade him? It's a good question. Like I said earlier, he's a wild card. And it's not that nobody wanted Cam Newton. They just didn't want him at a price tag of $20 million this season at the expense of cap space, draft picks, or reliable talent that would ultimately take away from your team. Cam Newton's such a big question mark that you want to be able to get him or acquire him for next to nothing. So like I said earlier, he's a wild card. Now, teams will be willing to go out and sign him at a reasonable price to either compete for a starting job or a job to back up a young quarterback. Now, Cam Newton's ego may not necessarily be thrilled with that idea, but let's face it, it's either that or the unemployment line, right? So this guy's really looking at a situation where he's going to be on the market looking for a 1-year prove-it deal as a starting quarterback, or he's probably going to take a 2-year deal at a reduced cost, backing up a young quarterback with the potential to jump in and replace him if things go south, right? So third question you got to ask yourself is, what teams could have interest in Cam Newton at this point? And there's a couple of them. The first one that comes to mind are the Washington Redskins. Now, as you know, Cam Newton has a pre-existing relationship with Redskins' new coach, Ron Rivera. Ron Rivera also has the final say on all player personnel decisions throughout the organization. Now, the Redskins already have a starting cornerback, Dwayne Haskins out of Ohio State, who was a rookie last season. But really at this point, his status with the organization is in question. He played poorly in his rookie year, despite improving a little bit the last few weeks of 2019, but it didn't really give us a lot of opportunity to have optimism moving forward, right? Now, Ron Rivera, he's a new coach, brought in a new staff. He's got all that player personnel power. The last coach, Jay Gruden, was actually fired after a few games last year because the team got off to such a bad start because initially he refused to play Dwayne Haskins because he didn't think he was ready for the rigors of the NFL. Then when he played his backups, they too performed poorly, and it ultimately ended up costing Jay Gruden his job after about 4 or 5 years in Washington, right? So you got to ask yourself, why would Washington want to bring in Cam Newton if they have Dwayne Haskins? Well, here's the thing about Dwayne Haskins. There's no guarantees that he's going to pan out to be a legitimate NFL starter at this point. And really, after what we saw last year, his stock has dropped a little bit since the NFL draft last year when he was taken in the top of the first round, right? So what you're looking at is a situation where, do you trade Dwayne Haskins while his stock is still moderate, or do you gamble as a franchise and potentially see where you're at the end of the season? Because by trading him now while the stock is still moderate and allowing the Skins to net a solid return, that makes sense. But if you wait till after the season, you risk really him not performing well again for a second year in a row. And really at that point, Dwayne Haskins' stock is completely worthless. You might as well cut him at that point. You're looking at a Jamarcus Russell scenario where you're cutting bait, you're running away, and you're just moving on, taking the loss, right? Now, one potential hiccup in the scenario if Cam Newton was to go to Washington is the fact that Washington actually just traded for Cam Newton's backup last year, picking up Kyle Allen, who started 12 games in Cam Newton's absence. So really, at this point, it's possible that Carolina picks up Cam Newton. However, really, the scenario is unlikely because it seems like the team is focused on moving forward in sort of a youth movement type of way, right? So if Washington's off the list, where else could Cam go? Now, the LA Chargers are a very intriguing destination for him, simply for the fact that really at this point, the only quarterback rostered is Tyrod Taylor. Now, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Tyrod Taylor, but he's more of a backup / transition quarterback And he's done that for teams like Buffalo and Cleveland recently. And really, he's not a long-term answer at the position. Now, he's a quarterback that takes care of the football. He can run the offense. He's definitely what you would call a professional or a journeyman, but he's not the type of guy that's really going to take your franchise soaring up the mountain to higher heights, right? Now, the head coach of the Chargers, Anthony Lynn, does like him, but at the same time, it's highly unlikely that Tyrod Taylor will be starting for the LA Chargers for the entire season. Now, with that being said, the team is said to be in the market to draft a quarterback, and they're looking at quarterbacks in the first round. But here's the problem. Joe Burrow is going to be off the board first. He's definitely going to go to Cincinnati, and you can't see Tua Tagovailoa falling past 5 at Miami, right? So in that scenario where both quarterbacks are off the board, you're really looking at the Chargers being forced to choose between Utah State quarterback Jordan Love or Oregon Ducks quarterback Justin Herbert. And basically both prospects are suspect. They do have some concerns, right? So Jordan Love is a phenomenal athlete, phenomenal skill set, tested very well at the combine, and his stock has been high since his junior year when he had a fantastic season. Let's be completely honest about it. But last year, he had a lot of turnover in player personnel at the skills positions. He had turnover in coordinators and coaching, and really his first year in a new system with a lot less talent around him, he didn't perform as well. He actually led college football with 17 interceptions, which really is something that NFL scouts are not thrilled about, right? Let's be completely honest about it. Now, Justin Herbert, on the other hand, this guy went to the combine. He did a fantastic job. He's a monster. He's strong, capable of standing in the pocket. He's also very mobile and can move around. And he's got a rocket launcher for an arm, right? But the questions really for a guy like that are more in terms of his intangibles, his leadership, his in-huddle presence, and he does have some suspect accuracy, right? There's a lot of teams that are concerned that he may prototypically fit the bill to be an NFL quarterback, but really he doesn't have the mindset, right? He doesn't have what it takes inside, that it factor, to come and be a game changer for their franchise. So Jordan Love and Justin Herbert, to wrap that up, they both have some concerns. Now, both of those guys, because of those concerns and because they're suspect, they don't really move the needle or provide optimism for the future, right? So the Chargers are basically this ugly sister franchise in LA to the Los Angeles Rams. They're already struggling with attendance, and they've only been there for a few years. Now, if Cam Newton turns out to be healthy, which he's passed the physical with doctors, but these teams are definitely going to want to get their own doctors and their own eyes on him and put him through a rigorous physical to make sure that he's worth the investment. If that is the case, Cam Newton really could be a value for the Los Angeles Chargers, who would essentially be looking to make a splash because those guys would be looking to put some butts in the seats. And everything costs money. Everything's all about the pesos, right? So we're not just going to throw that around recklessly if we're making a serious push to return the Chargers franchise to a state of stability, right? Because right now it's unstable. They've lost their longtime quarterback in Phillip Rivers. They've moved to a different city within the past few years. There's a lot of questions surrounding this team. Now, so we've talked Chargers and we've talked Redskins. There's two more teams we're going to talk about. One of them are the New England Patriots, right? Tom Brady just went to Tampa Bay. He left the franchise after 20 years, which leaves a big-time void at the quarterback position for what is normally a franchise looking to compete for the playoffs on an annual basis, right? Now, the only question you really got to ask yourself is Cam Newton's cost too high for Bill Belichick? Think about that for a second. And really, the answer is no. Not if the market for Cam is so soft and he really wants to play football this season. If you get down to the point where no one is willing to employ him, he's going to take what he can get. Otherwise, he faces the scenario of actually sitting out for the entire season till next year opens up, which with his health, if it is still bad, might not actually be a bad idea, right? Now, in that scenario, you got to ask yourself, does New England want to retool and compete this season? Or are they entering a rebuild to maybe grab, a quarterback next year in the draft like Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields to basically set the team up for the next 10 or 20 years? Really, it's all up to Bill Belichick. He's in charge of player personnel decisions. Obviously, he doesn't get too thrilled with the idea of spending a lot of money on big-name free agents. However, this move, because Cam Newton's stock is so low right now, would seem like a Belichick bargain move. And it's been reported that the team is unlikely to sign Jameis Winston, who's really the only other big-name quarterback who's a former starter that's really out there on the market right now. So I guess if New England's looking for a stopgap until they decide their future, a 1 or 2 year deal for Newton wouldn't be a bad idea if you're in New England, right? Now, with that being said, there's one more team out there that no one's really talking about, and I'm going to let you in on the secret. And the reason is because this team definitely, in my mind, is a sleeper and a big-time player in the Cam Newton market. And that team is the New York Giants. Don't sleep on the Giants. New York GM David Gettleman has ties to Cam Newton from his days as the GM of the Carolina Panthers. He was there in 2015 when Cam Newton signed a 5-year, $103.8 million deal with 40 million pesos guaranteed. Obviously, he thinks Cam Newton is capable of leading a franchise. He believes in him. He rewarded him with a huge, massive contract, and Cam played pretty good after that. He didn't return to that MVP level, but he did play well until really starting to miss games the past year or so. Now, the reason why you would even think about offering Cam Newton a contract is at a low value. He could provide a lot of stability and be a good backup behind rookie quarterback Daniel Jones. Now, Daniel Jones is transitioning into his second year at the helm, and out of Duke, he had plenty of highs and lows last season, and he was turnover prone. He had a lot of fumbles and a lot of interceptions. He didn't take care of the ball very well. Now, the New York Giants have been at the top of the draft rebuilding for the past few years, but they're at a point with Gettleman and with the pieces that they've collected that they really got to start transitioning and competing for a playoff spot, and really that's not crazy or highly unlikely considering the fact they're in a division with Washington, Dallas, and Philadelphia, which was essentially the worst division in the National Football League last season. So at a value, Cam Newton would be a good option for New York and for the Giants to back up Jones if he gets off on the wrong foot. That's all I have for today. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you're reaching out on the 5 o'clock Shadow Sports page on Facebook. Drop a comment. Let me know what you think about Cam Newton, what possibilities are for him in your mind. Also, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. It's available on any major platform. And also, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Michael5o'clock. Also, this weekend with Byron Hazley, shout out to my man B, we have a podcast dropping probably Friday or Saturday for our weekly podcast, The Front Porch Tailgate. It's presented by the 5 o'clock Shadow. There's a lot of comedy, a lot of sports. We cover a wide range of topics, and it's an absolutely fantastic show. You guys can't miss it. With that being said, I appreciate you guys listening today. Have a fantastic